Some stories fade with time, but others haunt generations. In 1992, a pair of newlyweds vanished during what was supposed to be the happiest week of their lives. And for nearly 2 decades, their case gathered dust, until a shocking discovery in 2010 forced everyone to relive the nightmare they thought was buried forever. Before we dive into this haunting case, please take a moment to support our channel. Your likes, comments, and subscriptions help us continue telling stories that deserve to be remembered. Now, let's go back to where it all began. They were young, deeply in love, and ready to begin forever. Daniel and Emily Foster, both 27, had met during college in Oregon. He was a photographer with a quiet soul. She was a bright-eyed teacher who loved to laugh. Their love story seemed almost cinematic, filled with long road trips, late-night talks, and plans that stretched a lifetime. In the summer of 1992, they decided to take a honeymoon trip across the California coastline, renting a cozy cottage near the cliffs of Mendocino, a scenic spot overlooking the Pacific Ocean. Their friends described them as the couple everyone admired. They had that kind of connection that made others believe in true love again. But what no one knew was that this trip would become one of the most baffling missing persons cases in California history. On June 14, 1992, Daniel and Emily packed their blue 1989 Honda Civic and set out from Portland, Oregon, for their week-long honeymoon road trip. They planned to visit a few iconic locations: San Francisco, Big Sur, then a quiet beachside town called Ravenwood, a place Daniel had always wanted to photograph. Witnesses recalled seeing them at gas stations, roadside diners, and one local motel where the staff remembered Emily's infectious smile. She had told the receptionist, "We're newlyweds. This is our dream trip." By all accounts, everything seemed perfect, until the night of June 18th, when they checked into the Ravenwood Inn, and were never seen again. When the couple failed to check out the next morning, the motel staff assumed they had left early for sightseeing. But when the room was entered later that afternoon, the bed was unmade, their suitcases half-packed, and Daniel's camera bag lay on the floor, empty. There were no signs of struggle. Their car was gone, and so were they. By the next day, their families had already called local police. The initial search covered the nearby coastline, forest trails, and highways, but there was no sign of the Fosters or their vehicle. Locals whispered theories. Some said they might have fallen from the cliffs during a late-night walk. Others believed something far darker had happened in that quiet town by the sea. And as the days turned into months, and months into years, the case grew cold. When Daniel and Emily Foster vanished in June of 1992, it was as if the ocean itself had swallowed them whole. No one saw a crash. No one heard a scream. No evidence, no closure, just silence. But sometimes, silence hides more than it reveals. Both the Foster and Reynolds families, Daniel's and Emily's parents, refused to believe their children were gone forever. Emily's mother, Margaret Reynolds, appeared on local TV countless times, pleading for information. Her trembling voice during one 1993 interview still echoes across true crime archives today. "They were supposed to come home and tell us about their honeymoon photos. I just want to know what happened. Please, someone must have seen them." Posters lined highways, cafes, and even rest stops across California. Every summer, Margaret returned to Ravenwood with flowers, placing them near the cliffs overlooking the sea, the last place her daughter was known to be. Daniel's younger brother, Evan, became obsessed with finding answers. He started mailing letters to local fishermen, hikers, and residents, asking if anyone had noticed something unusual that summer. But every lead went nowhere. Until one winter, a strange phone call changed everything. In late 1995, Evan received a call from an older man who claimed he had seen a blue Honda Civic parked near the Ravenwood lighthouse, days after the couple's disappearance. He said the car had been sitting there for nearly a week before it vanished. Police reopened part of the case and conducted a search around the old cliffs. Divers scoured the coastline, but the ocean was deep, unpredictable, and ruthless. What they found were scraps of twisted metal, possibly from a car door, and a single silver bracelet, later identified as Emily's. Still, there were no remains. No vehicle registration plates. Nothing to officially confirm their fate. Investigators considered the possibility of a murder-suicide, or that someone had abducted them after luring them away from the inn. But the families rejected that idea completely. They were happy. They had no reason to run, Margaret told reporters through tears. Someone took them from us. And for the next 15 years, those words hung over the quiet seaside town like a ghost. By the early 2000s, Ravenwood had changed. The old inn where Daniel and Emily stayed was shut down, the building decaying under moss and salt. Tourists still came for the views, but locals whispered that the place was cursed. Fishermen often reported strange things washing ashore: fragments of plastic, car metal, even an old shoe that was eerily similar to one Daniel had worn. But none of it could be proven. And as the years passed, the tragedy of the Fosters became another local legend, a warning to travelers and a wound for two families who never got to say goodbye. By 2010, nearly 2 decades had passed. New faces ran the police department, old files were collecting dust, and the world had almost forgotten the Fosters. Almost. Time has a way of erasing faces, softening memories, and dulling pain. But sometimes, a single discovery can awaken everything you thought was buried. 18 years after Daniel and Emily Foster vanished, a construction crew working near the Ravenwood coastline unearthed something that would shake the entire town and reopen one of California's most haunting mysteries. It was March 12, 2010. A small construction company was assigned to stabilize the coastal road near the cliffs of Ravenwood. The soil there had become dangerously unstable, with several minor landslides over the years. During excavation, one of the workers' machines struck something solid beneath the packed earth. At first, they assumed it was old debris from the road's earlier construction, until one man spotted faded blue paint beneath the dirt. They called the sheriff's office immediately. By the next morning, police had cordoned off the area. As the excavator continued to remove layers of soil, a horrifying sight slowly emerged. A crushed blue Honda Civic, wedged deep inside a collapsed section of the cliff. The license plate was almost unreadable, but forensic teams confirmed it within hours. It was Daniel and Emily Foster's car. When investigators pried open what remained of the car, they found 2 skeletal remains inside. One in the driver's seat, one in the passenger seat, their hands still close, as if frozen in time. In the back seat, Daniel's old camera bag was still there, but the camera itself was missing. Inside the glove compartment, they found a small seashell necklace and a roll of undeveloped film. Forensic teams worked day and night. Dental records confirmed what everyone feared. It was Daniel and Emily. 18 years of waiting, and now their families finally had an answer. But something about the scene didn't add up. The car's position was strange, buried nose first, as if it had gone off the cliff backward. Experts noted that the brake lights were on, frozen mid-press, and there were no signs of high-speed impact. Instead, the car looked like it had slid slowly before being swallowed by the collapsing ground. Even more unsettling, one of the investigators, Detective Laura Kincaid, noticed something that kept her awake for nights. The car keys were still in the ignition, but turned off. If it had been an accident, Daniel would have likely been trying to start or control the vehicle. But this looked deliberate. When the undeveloped roll of film was recovered from the glove box, hopes rose that it might tell the story of their final moments. Weeks later, The film was carefully developed. The photos showed the couple smiling, walking along the cliffs, dining at a small seafood restaurant, even laughing beside a local stray dog. Nothing out of the ordinary, until the final 3 images. One showed a blurry figure in the background of their sunset photo, standing far off on the edge of the cliffs, facing them. Another captured the same figure closer, this time near a parked vehicle behind them. And the final frame was almost completely dark, except for what looked like a flashlight beam cutting through the blackness. For investigators, it was a chilling revelation. Someone had been there with them that night. Narrator. Pause. Low tone. For 18 years, everyone believed the Fosters had vanished by accident. But now, that theory was beginning to fall apart. Detective Kincaid began reviewing all the old files from 1992, the original reports, missing person notices, and statements from the Ravenwood Inn staff. That's when she found something that had gone completely unnoticed. A maintenance worker named Alan Price, who had worked at the inn during that summer, and disappeared from Ravenwood a few months later. Price had been interviewed once, briefly, but his statement had never been followed up. When Kincaid tracked him down in 2010, living in Nevada under a different last name, he refused to talk. But something about his silence spoke volumes. For nearly 2 decades, the truth was buried beneath earth, ocean, and time. But with one discovery, and one roll of forgotten film, the ghosts of Ravenwood were finally beginning to speak. For nearly 20 years, the disappearance of Daniel and Emily Foster was a mystery without a trace, a love story that ended somewhere between the earth and the ocean. But after the discovery in 2010, one final question remained. How did they end up buried beneath the cliffs? The truth, as it turned out, was something even darker than anyone had imagined. Detective Laura Kincaid spent weeks trying to persuade Alan Price, the former maintenance worker, to speak. He had been 26 in 1992, a drifter who did odd jobs around the Ravenwood Inn. At first, he denied everything. But when shown a copy of the photo, the one where a shadowy figure appeared behind the Newlyweds, his hands began to shake. "Alan, that's not me. I mean, I don't remember. It was a long time ago." Kincaid pressed harder. Why had he left Ravenwood so suddenly that summer? Why had his name been erased from the inn staff list? Finally, under quiet confession, Alan began to talk. He claimed that on the night of June 18, 1992, he had seen Daniel and Emily arguing near their car, parked close to the cliff's edge. He said he'd gone outside for a smoke, saw their headlights still on, and thought nothing of it. But later that night, he heard what he described as a scream carried by the wind. When he went to look, the car was gone. Out of fear that the police might blame him, and because of a criminal record he already had, he left town and never looked back. But there was something else he didn't tell the police in 1992. He remembered seeing another car parked not far from the Fosters, a dark green pickup, one that belonged to a local fisherman named Calvin Ridge. And Ridge had a history. Calvin Ridge had lived in Ravenwood his entire life. Locals knew him as quiet, odd, and quick-tempered. In 1992, police questioned him briefly because his boat had been docked near where the couple's car might have gone off. He denied seeing anything, and without evidence, he was never investigated further. But in 2010, Kincaid learned that Ridge had moved inland just 2 years after the disappearance and died in 2005, taking whatever secrets he had with him. When police searched his old property records, they discovered something chilling. Behind his old cabin, there was a sealed storm shelter that had never been opened. Even though the man was long dead, Kincaid obtained a warrant. Inside the dark, musty shelter, investigators found a box of personal items, some belonging to Ridge, and others that didn't. Among them were Daniel Foster's missing camera, a torn piece of Emily's floral dress, and a hotel key tag labeled Room 12, Ravenwood Inn. The implication was terrifying. Ridge had likely followed the Newlyweds that night, possibly after a chance encounter at the inn or along the cliffs. What happened next was still uncertain, but evidence suggested he confronted them near the edge, and in the chaos, the car slid backward over the unstable cliff. Whether it was an accident or something worse, no one would ever know. The remains of Daniel and Emily were finally laid to rest in Portland, Oregon, in a joint memorial attended by both families and townspeople from Ravenwood. 18 years of unanswered questions had come to an end, but closure didn't erase the grief. Margaret Reynolds, Emily's mother, spoke during the ceremony, her voice trembling but full of peace. "They were together when they left this world, and that's all I ever prayed for." Detective Kincaid stood quietly in the back. She had solved dozens of cases in her career, but this one stayed with her. Not because of the horror, but because of the love that never faded. Before leaving the cemetery, she placed the recovered seashell necklace on Emily's headstone. Today, the Ravenwood coastline looks peaceful again, the waves endlessly crashing beneath the cliffs that once held their secret. Locals say that on some foggy nights, when the wind is still and the ocean hums softly, you can hear the faint sound of laughter coming from near the old inn's ruins. Some believe it's the Fosters, forever together, somewhere between sea and sky. The truth about Daniel and Emily Foster wasn't found in the ocean or in the dirt. It was found in what they left behind, a reminder that love, no matter how brief, leaves an echo that time can't erase. Thank you for watching this story. If you'd like to see more true stories like this one, please support our channel by liking, commenting, subscribing, and turning on the notification bell. It truly helps us keep these stories alive. Until next time, stay safe, stay curious, and never forget those who vanish without a trace.